So I'm very happy. I've had the pleasure of hearing Rod speak before, so I know that you're going to find this really interesting. And he is going to relate it somewhat to our ethics, and I'm sure this will provoke a few conversations.
Pick it up a notch. It's getting a little quiet in here, I think. That's good. You guys having a good conference?
Yes.
Excellent. I'm really excited to be here because this is the first time I've done a CFDS conference. So that's kind of cool. I've been speaking in Canada for, I guess, 20 years or so, in the United States and other places as well. But I thought I had done most associations, most conferences at least once. So Linda, thanks for inviting me out. And I really didn't know what to expect. I mean, I understand what the organization is, and I have friends that have done the training here and so on in the space. But not really clear what the conference would be like, so this is kind of fun for me to participate. Now, when we were trying to figure out what would be a good approach to an ethics-related topic, there's a variety of different opportunities that we'd considered. And what we decided to do was go with something that fulfilled some ethics, but tried to make it a little practical. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about ethics, we're going to talk about trust, and then we're going to look at ways of applying that to a specific business building strategy, referral generation, which I think is a great place to do that. And that's the approach we decided to do. So hopefully you'll really like that stuff. I hope this is useful for you, and fun, and interesting, and a change of pace, and all that. So why me on this topic? Well, you've read a little bit about my bio, hopefully within your package of information today. I have been in the industry 30 years now or so. Worked through all parts of it, IROC, MFDA, insurance side, private debt and equity side. So companies that you would recognize, like Investors Group, where I was a director for a while, Royal Bank, a little lending company in Canada, and had the good fortune to start a business that's now the largest private debt and equity dealership in Canada. Not well known in Ontario because your legislation is just changing on that, regulatory environment is changing, but your world is going to change if you're in the investment world out here in Ontario to be much more like the rest of Canada. So that's part of my background. Along the way I did things such as my CFP, my CIM. I am an Advisor of the Year award winner in Canada. I won that in 2004. Woohoo! I had a little business called Canadians Retiring Abroad, and we would do that. We would help Canadians retiring abroad, which was a lot of fun. We'd go down to Mexico and do stuff on cruise ships and things like that. We could do this on cruise ships. Oh yeah, it's great stuff. Are you saying come on like you don't believe it?
No, we did it one time. Short.
Oh, did you?
Single hole.
Hey! Single hole, that would be fun. We could do one of those nude ones too, right? Oh. Push the envelope too much. No, I mean, if you like that kind of fun ways to do your business topic, I've been speaking about that internationally for years. This is my third book on the topic called More Awesome Client Events. We talk about relationship building strategies on cruise ships and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. That's it. Little commercial.
Did you do any conferences on cruise ships? Just make sure you send me an invite.
Yeah, for you guys. Well, you could do this yourself. You could do yourself. So I have a long history in the financial services industry. Hopefully you're getting a sense of that, including chief compliance officer roles and so on. But my passion when I was in university was ethics and law, which I did as an undergrad, and then went and did my postgraduate level work in biomedical ethics at the Health Science Institute. This was like over 30 years ago, and was supposed to be prepped for law school, but I had both my kids in university, which I don't recommend. I know some of you, we go back to school, don't have kids while you do that. It's a bad idea. But what happened is now, later in my career, I can start actually having some more fun with the ethics topic, because believe me, there's no money in teaching ethics classes in Canada. Thanks for a little bit of contribution for Linda. I got a couple of sponsors to help cover my flight cost and stuff like that. So if you hear me mention their names as we go, it's because they kicked in some money for this. But I'm at a point in my career where I can do this stuff because really it's a lot of fun. So a lot of times at conferences, as you know, if you have a speaker, it's either one of two things, usually extremes. It's either they're selling something, and that's why they're there, right? Or someone's paying them a lot of money to be there, and I'm kind of following today kind of close to this. I'm getting paid a little bit of money, but I don't have to do a commercial. So this is really going to be about education and stuff. So if I mention my book, that's more for fun than it is for promoting anything. Sound good? Okay. Have I established any kind of level of trust with you, confidence? No. What's that?
Homeless Calgary?
Homeless Calgary. Was that a deal breaker for us today? No, I told you.
You don't have to boots.
Well, because I grew up in Vancouver, and I happen to be in Toronto, so hopefully I'm dressed appropriately. And my other business meetings were downtown there tomorrow. But yeah, currently from Calgary. I came out to see y'all, even though I don't even know what that means. Let's get on to our topic of ethics. You read in the media especially, wait, I'm going to take a step back. I want to make sure I understand my audience. We have people in here that hold themselves out as financial advisors generally, or just on divorce? Both? Financial advisors with a divorce specialty.
And some that are purely
Divorce.
Yeah.
And I understand we have some people that come from the accounting world into this, yes?
Yep.
Specifically from accounting. And others have insurance licenses and or mutual fund licenses.
No.
You don't, just CFPs without that?
PRC.
We don't manage
You don't manage assets.
Okay. Some do.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so I kind of have a mixed bag in here, which is good. How many of you would charge a fee to your client for your service then? Everybody would? You guys would, so even though you're not putting your hand up because it's not the case, it's because you just don't, I'm not going to help Rod at all with this. There you go. Better. See, just hold your hand up. The reason why I ask the question is not to kill time, is I'm really trying to understand my audience, because sometimes when I do these classes, I'm talking to a group that somebody has asked me to talk to. They need a talking to, that kind of talking to. Everybody here have kids?
Yeah.
They need a talking to. I actually think, and I'm not saying this to ingratiate myself to you because I'm not selling anything, this idea of a very clear value proposition and the opportunity to charge a fee to a client, as well as the fact that you have an code of ethics that you self-created and not imposed upon you, I think already as an organization, you're already at the cutting edge of what you've got right. Which excites me as an ethicist, but it also makes my job harder today because I really think you're doing a lot of stuff right anyway. And there are other groups out there that are mortified at the idea that they might have to articulate a value prop to the market and send them a bill and stuff like that, and they're freaking out over it. It's crazy. So I'm very respectful of the fact that you guys are really much farther along than other parts of the financial services space. But having said that, generally speaking, the financial services industry, like other large organizational institutions like, say, churches, political bodies, and so on, healthcare systems, society today is feeling distrustful of us, generally speaking. The most extreme kind of reports that are going on out there are specifically saying there's a crisis of trust, especially in the financial services industry. A crisis of trust. And we can point to a variety of phenomenon out there that would support that kind of assessment, stuff that we see all the time. What's going on out there that would make us think that there's a crisis of trust? Well, some of it has to do with the regulatory changes that are going on. Those of you that are in the money management space, either IROC or MFDA or exempt market or something like that, will have seen a steady increase of rules and regulations and responsibilities coming. Right now, we're talking about the United States already approving a fiduciary duty for financial advisors in the United States. Freaking people out in Canada. Freaking them out. Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, and one of the reasons I'll bring up what goes on outside of Canada is I do think Canada tends to sit and wait, watches what happens. They talk about it a lot, but ultimately kind of do what the world is doing, generally speaking, more or less. But at any rate, these things are important because even if they didn't come to me here, we should contemplate the possibility as business people and say, well, what if I do have a fiduciary responsibility? So we have this regulatory angst which is causing people to start talking about ethics more and more, start talking about trust and so on. We have, another example, this increased requirement for mandatory ethics training in various parts of the financial services industry. We have CFPs in the room. Yep, I did mine in '96. You won't see it on my card. I don't hold myself out as a CFP, but a long time ago. FPSC asked me about a year and a half ago to help design and deliver ethics classes, which is now, you will probably know, are mandatory. You must do that once every year. Tell this to people in other industries and they're shocked that for the first time people with that kind of responsibility have to do ongoing ethics training. It's surprising to some of them. So another example, we're seeing this also in the insurance space in some of the provinces requiring ethics as a requirement. Another way, changing business models. This idea that a financial services person will start to shift from a compensation based on commission and trailers towards one that's based upon billing their client and having to articulate value. That's a big deal. There's discussions, obviously this is taking place outside of Canada already. You're probably aware that those conversations are going on now in Canada about eliminating commission and trailers. Those of you that already have a value prop and a system for billing your clients are going to be so much farther ahead from the other ones that are just going to start to try to figure it out afterwards. So kudos for you for already being there. But really important, that will be a game changer if they eliminate commission and trailers for so many people out there. One of my sponsors for today is a portfolio manager that's based in Ontario, $600 million under management. All the new assets coming in are all done on a referral basis by either registrants or non-registrants, but they do not need to be registered. For those of you that are not in the money business, that may not sound significant, but asset managers that could participate in large, successful investment funds and get their clients involved with that without having to be a registrant is massive. It means their entire compliance risk goes away and they still participate in a revenue stream that's huge. And so some of those types of organizations are growing. One of the speeches that I do in Canada for various organizations, just started doing the last couple of months, is called The Death of the Fund Manager, a financial murder mystery. And what I've done is I've taken the characters, thanks for that, I've taken The Death of a Fund Manager as a quote from The Economist that says traditional fund management is dead or dying, and I put up the various characters from Clue, and they represent things like millennials, ETFs, the regulators, and so on. It's a lot of fun. And I won't tell you who ultimately kills the fund manager. You can probably figure it out. We'll save that in case you get a chance to hear the
So
speech.
does that mean Kevin O'Leary dies?
Yeah, that'd be good, you know. I could put up a picture, but I don't want to get sued. See, part of the problem of doing ethics classes is you really open yourself up. You've got to be really careful what you say. But point taken. Point taken. I don't know, have you ever met Kevin?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really not as bad as a persona he puts on. I know you get that. Good. So business models are changing in part because of concerns about trust. Trust. If you're on commission, how do I trust that you've got my best interest at heart? You know, that kind of thing. So people are exploring different models. And another one, and we could go on with lists here, millennials, changing tastes of the next generation. Those of you in the financial services space that have been at this for a while probably heard a long time ago somebody coming up to you and say, hang in there, what's your name? Sharon, hang in there. You know, the baby boomers are going to die, and all that money is going to go down to the next generation. And what did they say? The biggest transfer of wealth in history. And the assumption, it rests on this idea that millennials will want to do it the way that their parents did. Right? Which is silly. But you can see why they would assume it. They would assume it because it's in their best interest to assume that and hope that you believe it too. You know, that's that world. The reality, of course, is millennials, as you're going to hear, are less likely to trust us than their parents did and more likely to trust technology as a way of getting financial products and services. And that's why I think it is so critical, you're absolutely doing the right thing, is having a value prop that's tied to very clear sharing of specialized information, something that's super hard to replicate with an app on a phone, and it's going to set you guys miles ahead. So again, good on you. I know I'm speaking to the choir. I wanted you to know that I got that. Now, here's where I'm different from some of the compliance personnel that you would meet in the past. I hope you think I'm different. Most of them are lawyers, full stop, right? Or they come from lawyer backgrounds. And lawyers tend to be risk-minded, which is fair. So what they're saying is, hey, I don't want you to get into trouble, so if you spend some money on this and you pay me $450 an hour on that, I'm going to mitigate your risk. It tends to be their value prop. Lawyers tend not to be runners of businesses. If they are, they're not your compliance officer. They're out running their business, right? But I've been running these dealerships. I've been owners of the dealerships myself. So when I do compliance, I've been forced to think not only of risk mitigation, but business opportunities. And because I've spent so long in the industry and have had dealt with ethics as a topic for so long, my approach to this is to point out to people that getting it right isn't just good for its own sake, it's really good business. If we know how to communicate about it, it's really good business. So if you hear these expressions on the internet or on LinkedIn that says, yeah, I love LinkedIn because it gives the stupidest things that people, oh yeah, like. One of them is, integrity is doing the right thing when nobody is looking. Sounds good, right? Except it's pointless, because then nobody knows you're doing the right thing. And if you don't communicate that, the consumer might go to the person who's doing the wrong thing and get bad service. You should, if you're doing the right thing, communicate about it. Let people know you're doing the right thing. Those things are silly. Business people wouldn't do that. Ethics is not just about doing the right thing. It's about being a more successful business person because you are. And that's going to be part of my message for today. It is your opportunity to move ahead. So, let's do some philosophy. Let's do the traditional stuff. Let's make sure we understand some concepts here. What is ethics? Anybody? you have a working definition? Not that I do or anything, but... So ethics is about human behavior. It's not more complicated than that. It's about behavior where we have a choice. That's a critical thing. If you don't have a choice, according to philosophers, you're not subject to moral criticism. So it's about where we can choose amongst some options. And usually the choices we're making are considered to be important. And usually they're considered to be important because of the ramifications on other people. So whether or not you have a fork on the right side of your plate or the left side might make Nona happy, but it's not really a matter of ethics, it's a matter of what? Etiquettes. The words come from the same root, but we make a distinction between ethics and other kinds of choices. Fashion choices are not necessarily ethics choices, for example. So it's important activity. In fact, it's important enough that we want to start influencing or encouraging choices. That's how we feel as a society. So it's about that kind of activity. Where it gets really important stuff, such as the teaching profession or the medical profession or the financial services industry, when it's so important, grandiose powers come to play on that. They also want to encourage activities. And so you see the introduction of rules and laws and codes, and importantly, sanctions and punishments and those kinds of things. So where ethics starts getting at its peak, and this is kind of some of the stuff that we'll deal with in our business, it's really at a point where it's considered to be so important that everybody's watching us and want to make sure we get it right. And it's one of the reasons that we're seeing these regulatory changes in the financial services space is the powers that be is saying, generally speaking, not you guys in this room, but generally speaking, you're not getting it right. Consumers are not getting it. They don't trust you anymore. If you guys aren't going to fix this yourself, we're going to come in and impose more rules and more sanctions and so on. So we get this kind of, where action is really important, we get this, start getting complicated systems around it, the systems that we experience as professionals. What is ethics not? So I have some pet peeves, and some of my pet peeves around these topics are what I would call well-intentioned people minimalizing the topic, simplifying it, overly simplifying it. And they usually do that by throwing out slogans like, hey, ethics, we all have a moral compass. All you got to do is follow that and you make the right choice. Let's pick that one because that's one that I keep hearing. Well, of course, that's silly. There's no such thing as a moral compass. I'm not sure exactly what they're pointing to when they say that. And even if there was one, it's not at all clear that all of our compasses point in the same direction anyway. People just don't do that. It's really not how it works. It's as if to suggest that, hey, what you think is appropriate in here is appropriate, but then there would be no standards at all. So clearly that's not very useful. Another one that's common out there is the golden rule. Hey, we don't have to do an ethics class. Just treat people the way you would want to be treated, and that, let's get on and doing business. Again, the problem with that is people want to be treated differently. The way you want to be treated is not necessarily the way your client wants to be treated. And if I was your client, Sharon, if I said, Sharon, I want to be your most important client and I want you to pay all your attention to me, just because I want that, how could she possibly deliver that? In fact, she'd probably say, listen, I got to treat all my clients the same, or equally, right? So the mere fact that I would want to be treated a certain way doesn't necessarily imply anything. It's not a useful expression. There's a couple more that I don't like. Follow the law. Not very useful. Laws themselves don't cover every scenario. Laws cover specific things. And ethics is often that stuff that is included within the law often, but often that stuff that's not included in the law. Sometimes it would be considered appropriate or ethical to break a law. So for example, you could have a law that says no trespassing. Trespassers will be prosecuted. But you see a person on the lawn who's suffering a heart attack and choking on something, society might say you have a moral responsibility to break that law and go and save them. So you can't equate a moral choice with a law. It just doesn't work that way. Nazi Germany is the classic examples you'll read if you do an intro philosophy class on ethics. Saying to a German soldier, say, I was just following the law, so I did this, that, and the other thing. From today's perspective, we say, no, that's not sufficient to justify what you did or refrain from doing and so on. So the law does not equal ethics. It's more complicated than that. And then another one is morals are relative. Hey, what I think is right, what you think is right, no one can know. We can't decide this. So, whatever, free love and all that kind of stuff. Of course, it all sounds really good over beers, but in real life, when we have to do stuff, it can't work that way. There needs to be some standard. Otherwise, we can't even criticize somebody. Right? You can't even say that's wrong. You say, no, whatever I think is right is right. So we have often when we're introduced to ethics, like without it not being in a formal environment, exposed to comments, quips, slogans that would never stand up under scrutiny. So I really encourage you to do what you're already doing, which is to embrace things like the codes of ethics, understand why they're there, understand why it's important to do ethics classes in your conferences like other people do. It's important to get it right. So why do we influence behavior? Why do we say this is ethically appropriate or not? What's going on when we're having those thoughts or saying those things? What's really going on is we're tapping into a value, a thing that we think is important. A value, something that we want to encourage or promote, that we see manifest in our action choices, so we want to encourage people. So values are something we all have. They tend to be longer lasting. That doesn't mean that they're not always subject to change, but the kinds of things that stick around for a while with a person, with a society, maybe with a profession, and it influences the why we do what we do. So the choices that we make, or why we're in the business that we're in, or why we would treat our clients a certain way, or why we want to become part of an association, those kinds of things. It's about values first. I really want to stress that, because values now is going to be an ongoing theme for a while through this session. What are some of the values in the financial services industry? What are some of the general values that are in the financial services industry? Anybody? If you had to write a value statement for your business, the why you do, what pops into your head?
Clear communication.
So that is an action. Can I restate that in the form of a value? Because I believe you're correct. And it's exactly the kind of stuff I hear a lot. So you would be saying, I believe clear communication is important. And therefore, I endeavor to provide clear communication. So I would even say there might be a value beyond that. Why is clear communication important? Because I believe people should make informed decisions, for example. And so you're right. Behind some of these things that we think are important in terms of what we do, we say, why am I doing it this way? Why do I struggle to make sure the disclosures are there? And why do the regulators tell me I need CRM2 disclosures and all this stuff? Is because of this values. People should have enough information in the right way, in a way that they understand, so they can make a choice that makes sense for them and understand the ramifications of the choice. And I think a lot of us in the financial services space subscribe to that value. Thanks. That's a great example. Another one.
Honesty.
Yeah, honesty. What does that mean?
Transparency.
See, that's about communication.
Yeah. But you can communicate falsely as well.
Yeah.
So, I guess, the perception of truth.
Sounds like that there's some sincerity in there as well. Like, I really want to make sure that they get it. I know I'm giving this big disclosure, but I want to go through and make sure that they get what their choices are. Is that what you're saying?
No, maybe it's more like honesty and intention. Right?
Give me an example and an action that would represent that value.
I'm thinking to my brokerage days where this one guy, he focused on trading penny stocks for older ladies, and was basically told not to do that because there was an integrity and honesty. There was something that wasn't at face value in what he was doing.
Okay, good. Well, that is an action, and there should be a value behind that. I would wonder why he thought it was appropriate to trade, as a compliance officer, to trade penny stocks for little old ladies. I would wonder, but there could be a reason. Could be 1% of their portfolio, perhaps. Sorry.
But I never argued with him, I guess.
Yeah, maybe that's right. They're easy clients. What are some of the other things we could consider a core value in financial services?
Well, you serve the best interest of your client.
Putting your client's needs ahead of your own. Yeah, I think that's a great one. And why? Because people should be treated properly and fairly, right? And it's not disconnected from communication, but similar, for sure. We receive information, so protecting the information we get from clients. We believe that if the client discloses something to you, that's private. And we should make reasonable efforts to keep private. I know we all do this, but now when you're going, oh yeah, that's right, I do that, and because I think that's the value that's underlying that. Fulfilling commitments. Hey Linda, you want me out here at 3 o'clock? I'll be there, and early, and I'll be ready to go. You say when. So I made a commitment to her, and part of me asking her to trust me going forward is being able to demonstrate that. I think all of you agree that to the extent that you can, if you make a commitment to a client, that your value system is such that we should probably follow that up, right? Right. So what we have in our business, like in many other organizations and so on, or professions, is some core values that underlie things. But then what happens is we start to layer pieces on top of this. It gets more complicated. The layering on top of values, the first step of that is what we call principles. So based upon these values, we come up with these, again, slogans or quick reminders of how we should behave based upon the values that we subscribe to. So, and there's many principles. I've listed a few that would be, a couple will be familiar to you and one might not be. So the harm principle is an expression popularized in contemporary philosophy from the British. David Hume was the champion behind this. And what's the harm principle? Act in a way that doesn't harm others, as a basic principle. Not very useful on its own. It gets adjusted somewhat in the way we might say, well, act in a way that produces the least amount of harm for the least amount of people. So based upon this idea that people should be treated properly, these underlying values, principles are established. Another one might be the other. Principle of utility. Utility is an older word that we might best say today is value. I should give the most amount of utility to the greatest number of people. Or we might say the greatest amount of value to the greatest number of people today. And so the distinction between these principles is some might find that first principle wanting. Because they might say, hey, I can easily do no harm. I'm going to quit my business. I'm going to sit in my basement and meditate. Or what I do is play Xbox and have a beer. That's great. I'm not engaging anybody. I'm not causing any harm, maybe to myself and my growing behind and what have you, but no harm. But the problem with that from an ethics perspective is I'm also not doing any good, right? So part of what we know is that it's not enough that we don't do harm, but we need to engage people and think about what value we're giving to society. And that principle of utility is really saying, can I give the most amount of value to the greatest number of people? And I would personally tweak it a little bit, based upon my own sense of things, that when we include that value that we're given, we also mean to ourselves. Mutually beneficial business is appropriate. We can give value by giving away your services. You could give more value by giving it all away. But we have to factor our own value generation when we do that. And part of the trick in any business, especially in financial services, is this balancing off between the value we're giving and what we're getting for giving that. And is it clear to the client? It's one of the reasons why we have these developments going on where the regulators are saying, hey, clients don't see what it's actually costing them for this product that they're in, and so they don't know what they're getting, they don't understand the value, and it's one of the reasons why we're being challenged to change that. So, 2 principles. I'll only do one more principle on there. Again, there are many. Principle of universalizability. So this comes from Immanuel Kant, German philosopher. This is a more intriguing one and one of my favorites for the financial services space. So he says with this that part of the way we can judge the appropriateness of an action is whether or not we can universalize that action. Anybody here have 3 or more kids? Yeah, right on. Italians. Gotta love them. How many kids do you have? 3. Okay, that's good. A good thing I said 3 more. I got 2 buddies at home. They have 5 kids each. But well, this will work for you. So if you buy one of your kids a car, do you have to buy another one a car? Hey, come on, just make it easy. Yeah, and then the next one? Yeah. And how about, hey, no, your undergraduate degree is paid for. And then the next one comes along and says,
Actually, thank God, he chose different fields.
But you know where I'm going with this.
Expectations there.
Yeah. So part of what we get as parents is that what we do for one, we've got to do for another one. And that basic thing that we all get becomes a massive problem in the financial services industry. Because what's clear, and what consumers are realizing is clear, is you cannot universalize things the way that they think they should be universalized. I'm going to give you an example. The second book that I wrote was called Move It or Lose It, and it came out in late 2007, and it was about why I thought a correction was coming and what it could look like. And so I was speaking around this topic, and often I'd speak to advisors like this, and very often advisors would get angry at me. Not the ladies. Guys are a little bit more prone to anger. I'd have some guy afterwards say, you're being irresponsible, and you shouldn't say the marketing. No, what gives them anxiety is because now that they have this idea, what do they do about it? Do they start calling all their clients and say it's time to sell? Hey, it's time to get out of Canadian equities, let's buy a money market fund. Now, those of you that are not in the money business want to make sure you're clear what the implications of that is. First of all, they've got to call everybody, hundreds of people. They've got to paper every one of those recommendations from a compliance perspective. They're incurring risk, time and actual risk in papering and recommending a sell. They're moving out of something that's probably paying them a trailer into something that's not paying them a trailer. So not only do they have opportunity costs, you're giving up actual monthly income, which means that all the layers of management that are all taking a piece of that monthly income, none of those guys are getting paid on that as well. So you have this problem where even if they thought it was true, what the heck do they do about that information? One step further. Let's suppose that the powers that be, because I'm not that smart, I thought there was going to be a correction. Quite likely there's a bunch of people in senior levels in Canada running great big mutual funds. The bankers out there going, yeah, you know what? If me personally, with my account, I'm going to sell Canadian equities and sit in the sidelines for 6 or 8 months and come back in. Are they allowed to do anything about that with all the money they manage? No. Mutual fund manager must stay invested in those equities. If it's a Canadian fund, they've got to stay in Canadian equity funds. They can do whatever they want with themselves, providing there's no conflict of interest. They've got to stay invested. Can you imagine them saying to their colleagues, hey, everybody out there selling mutual funds in my company, you know, Big Bank Canada or Big Mutual Fund Canada, I don't want to say any particular one because I'm being videotaped today, saying, hey, you guys, tell all your reps, Canadian markets peaked and we're all getting out. What the hell would happen? It'd be chaos. Theoretically, the market could go down to zero. We have a problem of it's very hard, impossible, to universalize some of the things that we would think are important. The consumers think that we're going to tell them it's time to buy low and sell high, and you cannot universalize that in the system. I think that makes it very interesting from an ethics perspective. Pull myself back. Talking about values, we start with values, which is why we want to influence behavior, and the first step in doing that is principles. Where does it go from there? Well, especially in our space, we start getting a whole whack of stuff. Every province, as you know, in Canada has their own criteria for securities regulations. There's their own securities regulator, their own insurance regulator. Then you have national associations. Then you have associations that you must belong to or ones that you choose to subscribe to, like this organization. And each one of them has codes and rules and regulations, and it becomes harder and harder and harder to not even break them by accident. So one of the interesting byproducts of a very well-meaning intention of saying, hey, this is really important stuff we're doing, let's get it right, is what's come out the other side is a very complicated system where people often just don't know what's expected of them from time to time. It is very complicated. And I get that. As a compliance officer, one of the reasons I left that world was because it is so stressful not knowing what's expected of you all the time, never mind what the people in the field are doing, and you're responsible now for hundreds of people. It's very difficult. So we have, even though we're told when you do your proficiency examinations, we are in a principles-based profession, what we actually experience is a whole bunch of rules and regulations and systems and compliance stuff. Accountants, do you feel the same way in your space? Not as much? Easier for you? Don't envy the people doing insurance and mutual funds, hey?
No.
Don't do it.
They're completely different ethics than, I think we were ethical just to start out.
Yeah, you got it right up front.
Not only that, I think, but
people don't mind coming to get the service. It's a different sell. It's a different.
Yeah, it's a different thing. My son's a
Yeah.
CPA, great business, love the business. And again, I know that's one of the reasons I want to include you in this is I don't want you to think I'm saying that we're all getting it wrong or you're getting it better than they are. But what we're seeing, and I wish financial services people, the other ones, could spend more time with your group because then they could see what I think is a direction of evolution in this space, is people looking more like accountants and more like lawyers. I mean, if you read The Economist on these topics and Canada gets criticized, one of the things they say is, I can't believe that they let financial advisors get paid by the manufacturers. We would never let doctors get paid by the pharmaceutical companies. And that's what's being said. I see it sometimes said in Canada, but a lot of these expressions are coming from outside of Canada. So again, good on you that you're moving along. You've already started moving along that track. But this is the world of a lot of people out there. It ends up being so This is the point I'm trying to make. It starts with values, and we stop talking about values, even though that's the crux of everything behind this, and we start talking about rules and regulations. And that is not what actually drives the business, as you're going to see. So one of my theses to the industry is okay, I get why you've given us this complicated system, but it's so divorced now from the underlying values that nobody thinks or talks about it. And so it's missing the point. It's one of the reasons we have a problem. We have a rules-based system, even though they think we don't. So these rules are not helping us the way that the system is set up. Rules can't cover every single action. Rules make it possible for someone to say, hey, I didn't break a rule. This must be okay. I didn't see that this was wrong for me to do that. When we're doing the CFP-related courses, we'll often include case studies. And the case studies will have I like to design weird case studies where there's clearly not a rule, but everybody realizes that there's an ethical problem. One of the ones, for example, is an advisor and a manager are in the elevator. The manager had given the advisor a referral. The manager says, hey, how did that go with that referral? What happened in your meeting? Did that go well? And the advisor has a dilemma. What do you see? And this is what makes it fun. First of all, is there a rule in the compliance manual that says don't discuss matters in the elevator? Probably not. I've seen a lot of them. It's probably not that, right? So you've got to get past that to principle. So would it be inappropriate for the person to comment? Okay, and then why?
Well, it depends on what they say, but usually it's like, I can't say anything, but thank you very much for the referral. Usually he says, but you're not saying anything because it's confidentiality, right?
Yeah, and that's a great response. Not all the financial advisors that I get in class are so quick to arrive at that.
But the dilemma with that I always found is you're all governed by the same rules of confidentiality. And in an organization, you need to be able to communicate amongst each other, even to your manager. Your manager asks you, say, it went very well. I think we're moving along in the process. They decided to do this. Oh, great. Or it didn't. Well, what could you have done better? Why didn't it? So either you do or you don't. You're either all governed by that same confidential whatever it is, or everybody works independent.
And this is what makes ethics fascinating. Both the ladies are saying things that are not incorrect. You were going to add something? No? So how about this? This is what some people will say, but it shouldn't occur in the elevator. So then you'll see, that's why I think it's
people are in the elevator.
Well,
Maybe there's no one there.
Is the rule that, if there's nobody in the elevator, it's okay? Or if there's somebody else? But my point is that there's probably not a rule that covers it. So it does become about ethics and values. And if we're reminded of so I just want to make sure I'm making the point clear. If we walk around going, what's the rule about this? What's the rule about that? We're going to be in a million different scenarios where the rules don't speak to it. It doesn't mean that, therefore, what you did was appropriate. If we go back to the values behind that, so what were the values? Confidentiality, right? So is this environment considered to be some kind of breach of confidence? Maybe it is. However, we also made a promise to, who's the lady beside you? Catherine. So Catherine, when you were engaging that client, before you went in the elevator to meet your boss, you probably said something to the client like, part of the reason you like dealing with our firm is I'm surrounded by great people, and I'm here to give you the help you need, even if I don't have all the answers. Anybody ever said that in their life, in their business career?
Yeah.
At some point. We almost all did, right? So the implication being is that I should be able to ask my manager, say, yeah, they had this really interesting tax question, and I didn't know how to answer it. I was going to ask you anyway. Because part of what the client might understand is that you're going to talk to the powers that be and make sure they get the stuff that they need. So it is complicated. But maybe the way we should have done this is said something, a merger of the two things there. Say, listen, I really want to talk to you about this because I think there's some value you can bring to the client. Can we wait till we get into your office? And being polite and respectful. There's a lot of people in the financial services industry that are hanging on by the skin of their thread, right? Skin of their teeth, by a thread. Here we go, thanks. And if they don't get those referrals from their boss, they start wondering about mortgage payments and stuff like that. So it's very important for them that if their boss gives them a referral, that they're attentive to them and giving them the kind of interpersonal feedback that they need. But the timing of that and how it's positioned, I think, is important. But I like that example because back to point then, it's not covered by a rule. We need to have the values behind the rules for those things to make sense. If we're not talking about values, we wouldn't know what to do there. Hey, I didn't break a rule. The big one on the rules is rules are shitty at dealing with conflicts of interest. And one of the biggest problems I think that people discount the discussion of ethics in any environment is they go, oh, ethics are right and wrong. We all know the difference between right and wrong. And they think of the obvious example in their head. The biggest problem is not a choice of right and wrong. It's a choice of competing rights. That's the biggest problem. And some of the classic dilemmas that we have, conflicts, are a choice between short-term needs and long-term needs. The classic, and I don't know that any of you have seen this, some of you with CFPs might have seen this, a lot of the ethics teachers out there, when they hold up an example, are typically, very often are talking about divorce scenarios. In their minds, that's the classic conflict of interest, and for all the reasons I know you know. You're dealing with a couple, or let's say you're an advisor, you start dealing with a couple, and you realize that you can't serve them both 100% anymore, that either you need to bring somebody in or you need to give up the relationship. And I don't know if you've been in discussions with that as an example from other types of advisors. Have you ever seen them talk about this? Some of the things they'll say are, no, it's okay for me to keep one of the clients. No, it's okay for me to deal with both of them. I'll just disclose that there's possible conflicts. I don't agree with any of that. I tell them the best thing to do is to bring in some specialists, step away from the process, and then afterwards figure out if you're going to re-engage in with one or both of them after the smoke clears. Because I think that's the kind of conflict that one can't resolve.
That's the beauty of having that specialty, or the CFPs and everything else that some of us have, with the financial professionals, because we're not in it for the dollars, right? But there may be the potential to preserve one of those relationships. Even though you may lose one, you may lose it within the organization, but maybe preserve one of the relationships, and we help sort of bring all that together. And I don't know, I think that could be a good thing, but ethically that might be good because you're distancing yourself from that whole situation and waiting for it to calm down and picking it up later. So.
Yeah, and I think that's where after some discussion, people start to land as they go from what their initial response is to a more thoughtful response. Like, oh yeah, wait a second, no, I can just disengage. But again, so many advisors are so hanging by a thread that the thought that they might lose a household and ultimately might lose control of that is unnerving to them. It is a great business opportunity for you, though. And one of the things we're going to talk about as we get a little closer to the end of the session is how to take some of these things and communicate it in a way that generates business opportunities, because that's important to me. I want to get it right, but I want to make more money if I'm getting it right, especially if I'm getting it more right than other people. I think that's an appropriate thing to want. Another quick conflict of interest that's kind of classic being discussed today, which we've already mentioned, is compensation structure. I teach some of the proficiency exams and have helped design some of them. And when I started teaching them for the regulators, I was surprised initially to see new language showing up that said things like, securities regulators are currently wondering if commission-based compensation is an inherently irresolvable conflict. The first time I saw that in a course that I was teaching was about 2009, I think. And I remember going, that's what they're thinking. You're not going to put that in writing in a proficiency examination unless you're giving the market warning. We're wondering if we will just decide that commission-based compensation is just irresolvable conflict. And here we are now several years later where the discussion is ramping up, and that's the kind of thing we saw coming years ago. So that's examples of conflicts of interests. Rules don't create business opportunities. It's all well and good to manage risk, but at the end of the day, we can manage risk and go into business. What we want to do is manage risk and increase our revenues by serving more people. So how do we take this idea of values then, refocus on the values, spend less time talking about the rules that the lawyers want us to talk about, more time talking about the values, and actually end up getting betterment out of this by reducing our risk, by being able to apply the rules better if we see them, but by increasing, and this is key, increasing business opportunity from understanding the values and how to articulate them. So what we want to do then is by understanding what values mean as we create trust. So a key strategy to building a business is around trust. Now we're shifting gears. We're going to spend a little bit more time talking about this concept of trust now. And trust are directly related to values, as you're going to hear me articulate. We need to understand values first before we can start establishing trust with the market. How does that work? Well, first of all, is it important? Is there anything more important than establishing trust? And you're saying that intuitively, right? Have you seen any research on these topics? Anyone know who Julia Littlechild is in the financial services space in Canada? Us old-timers, we know. Julia Littlechild is still doing original work, and I will follow her stuff. So last bit of research, she polled, I don't know, thousands of top-quality clients and asked them to categorize in like 100 different categories the number one reason that they selected and kept an advisor. And the number one reason, clearly in all the research, was first, trustworthiness, yeah. And which is interesting because they'll still have conferences today where the entire theme is trustworthiness. And I remember 20, 30 years ago going to conferences and it was trustworthiness and trust. And it's the kind of thing that just, it's always there. It's so important, you would think we'd all be really good at it, right? Are we really good at it? Do you have a working definition of trust, if I asked you? We just said it's the most important thing we can do. If we don't have trust with the market, if the profession doesn't have trust, it could go away. And yet, you say, so what is trust? Any responses? I know it's late in the afternoon. Come on, get excited.
Being honest.
Being honest is trust. I think it's a condition that could lead to a state of trust. I think it's related, but I think there's more to it than that. Anybody else got one?
I think it's a feeling of comfort and confidence.
I love the word confidence.
We're working with.
Yeah, and I think we're moving along towards that a little bit more. I'll show you a definition that kind of bops around social media. Again, I said already, I love watching social media because the weird stuff is said, and everyone goes, I like that, that's great. So here's a definition of trust that was offered on social media. In business, trust is the acceptance of value or quality of a brand, product or service without evidence or inspection. That sounds like blind trust to me. Faith, maybe. I think this is dangerous. Imagine telling the consumers in the financial services space, just trust me, I don't have to give you any kind of evidence of any of that kind of stuff. It's ridiculous. And it doesn't take very long before we go, well, this is actually a really crappy definition. And that's one of the reasons why I like teaching ethics, is I think there's a lot, even when there is discussion of this stuff out there, a lot of it's really poor quality. I have some other favorites. I might as well give them to you now since I started a couple minutes early.
I was going to comment, I've actually felt uncomfortable when I try to provide, if you want to call it, evidence for inspection, and the client doesn't seem to want to bother with that. And I'm like, no, I want it to be out there. I want you to understand this or whatever. But where the trust is there and they feel like they don't really worry about that stuff.
And so what could be going on there is that they've already received enough evidence to trust you. So we're going to talk about what we do actually to establish trust. So you're going, oh, I don't want, please look at more, and they're going, no, I really looked at enough. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't, and I'm not justifying their actions. I'm like you, I would say, that's great, I'm glad you get it. Can you initial here? Can we just talk about this? And then I would do what you would do, is I say, listen, I've been at this a long time. 5 years from now, you're going to go, we talked about what now? Right? They're going to have no clue. And so part of it, and this is why as compliance officers, you'll always hear us say it's not enough that we do the right thing, because I believe we do most of the time. We must document it. We must be prepared to demonstrate we did the right thing for all the reasons that we know is going to happen. One of my colleagues out there that's starting to get some traction as a speaker, she's coming to this space from outside financial services. She's doing dementia classes, just getting approved for advocates. And it's really clever because she's never been in financial services, but she's realizing that a bunch of us are going to have that informed decision-making topic. And so I've been counseling her on how to help make it most meaningful to the financial services spaces I think she can. So that when the client is 5 years out and you go, I gave them all the information I wanted them to know, and they're going, I forgot, I don't know, what did we talk about? But yeah, huge. Needs to be more than this. Two other really quickie expressions you see that are related to this on the internet that I hate. One is, fake it till you make it. You hear that in the financial services industry? Did you ever have a boss at one of those companies that you started with years ago that you'd like to forget that you were there?
She just said that today.
Yeah, so, and that's great. And so it's a nice safe environment for us to
I like to carry my little
explore.
binder. Thank you.
But, okay, so here's the counterpoint on the fake it till you make it. What is that really saying? Mislead the market to have them think that you're at the skills and the abilities that you're not quite at yet. but you think you will be one day, but start with me now. That's what that means, fake it till you make it. There's one of the Dragons ladies, or the Sharks ladies, I can't remember which one is she. Arlene, who's the one with the so-called real estate maven from New York? Who's that one?
Oh, yeah, she does that little commercial.
Barbara Corcoran. Now, I'm sure Barbara doesn't actually pen her own posts, but it'll be a picture of Barbara, and the last one said, never be afraid to take on a client beyond your skill set. And then my response was, as long as the client knows that they're beyond your skill set before you start working with them. It's the right thing. I don't care. If you understand that you're new for me, and we want to work together, that's great. You can be my first, right? As long as they know. But there's this whole thing in so many other industries that are kind of faking where you're really at in the course of trying to get clients that you really want to have one day. Hate all that stuff. So trust doesn't work for me. Let's go and speaking of the word confidence. I like that word. I want to suggest to you that trust represents two states of confidence. And not both of them need to occur. But when we say, I trust you, Sharon, I trust you, what am I meaning when I say that expression? This is how I approach it as a philosopher. So, first, I say, Sharon, I trust you. I could mean, I trust that you can do it. I trust you have the skills, the ability. You say, hey, I'm going through a divorce, and you say, I can help you with that. I trust that maybe you're part of an organization that if we get into areas that you haven't seen before, that you've got resources around you. The second, I know who to call. Wait, the software is not doing quite right. I'll call Linda. We're going to make sure we get the right picture. Whatever it is, I say, I trust you. I'm saying, I trust you can do it. We call that kind of trust ability trust. Make sense? Good. There's a second version of trust. We call it integrity trust. Sharon, I trust you'll actually do it. You'll actually do what you say you're going to do. Very different thing. When those of us with kids, the Italians in the room, say, hey, I know you can make it home by curfew. I'm just not sure you're going to choose to do that. That's what I'm worried about. I can trust you can actually physically get your ass home. I'm just not sure you're going to choose to do that. Same thing with driving. As we're driving down the road, I trust that those people know how to drive. I have to, or society won't function. I don't always trust that they're going to make all the right choices, that they will actually follow the rules of the road. And so when I say I trust you, I'm saying I trust that you will in fact do what you say you're going to do. So when we're communicating to the market and we're trying to establish trust, what we should be thinking about is both of those states of confidence. And that's true of the consumer, and as you're going to see, it's true of the lawyers you go out to say, hey, refer some business to me. Hey, financial advisors, get rid of your conflict of interest that you're going to have. Give me this problem file. I'll give it back to you when we get through this. Or whoever you're going to that is a source of business for you, saying, I want the market to trust me. What we're saying is I want them to trust I can do it, and I want them to trust that I will do it. Ability trust and integrity trust. So how do we get the market in that state? What we in fact do is we provide evidence in support of that. I'm not saying you consciously do it all the time. We provide evidence in support of both states of confidence. So let's look at the ability trust factor first. What do we do, and this is an easy one, what do you guys do to establish ability trust with the market? Clients or referring parties?
Continuing education.
Continuing education, that's an example. How about the initial education you got?
Right, the designations.
Huge. It's one of the things you're doing to say, hey, I know what to do. I can do it. What are the other kinds of things that we might do? Do you ever talk about your level of experience? Hey, I've been at this for a while. Hey, I'm a lady who started the association. I wrote a book. I designed the software. She has lots of stuff Linda can say to establish ability trust with the market. So maybe anyone's part of a large organization with a recognizable brand?
We also.
Yeah, who's you? Cool.
TD Well.
Yeah, it's a TD Well. So you could say, sorry, TD. Oh, TE Well, even better. Yeah, a real wealth management company. That's great. Okay, sorry. One letter makes all the difference in the world. I know it does. So you say, RTE Well, this is prestigious. They don't just hire just anybody. Yes, I've been at it for 20 years or what. No, you're young. I've been at it for 10. I've been at it for 20 years. I've got my designations. I've got my licenses. Hey, but you know what? I'm surrounded by a big organization. If I drop dead tomorrow, don't worry. Someone's going to step up. You're going to be fine. You're part of a big, happy system family. You probably have words that you are comfortable in saying to establish trust. that kind of trust with the market. And I don't think that anybody can make a living in our space if they don't get at least some skills in this. We all get to that point through a trainer or on our own. We figure it out, establishing some kind of ability trust with the market. And a big one, especially in the insurance space, are letters after the name. In fact, one of the criticisms of many parts of the financial services industry is so many people run around with so many letters that it's ridiculous. And you see entire articles being written on, like, really? You got 30 letters after your name? You know, the surgeon has two letters after the name and you've got this, really? So we have to be a little careful that we're not overselling the evidence. It's got to be meaningful evidence, meaningful criteria, right? And I think that's important. So the comment about there's a guy who started another certification in the state. And so, and first thing in my head is there's another one, and there's another one. One, I think the idea of picking, even if you have more, the reason I don't put CFP after my name, one of the reasons is because it's not germane to what I'm doing. I don't care. You can read my bio. I'm trying to keep it to the point. So a lot of my clients are asset management organizations. I have a CIM, which is not a very significant designation anyway, but I try to make it clear to my client the business that I'm in. This is what I do. It's asset management stuff around this, okay? Nothing else. I don't deal with people and their financial plans. Why would I put CFP after my name? So one of the things I would always say if I was coaching somebody is we've got to establish trust, but let's stick to the kind of stuff that we want the market to see us as specialists about, and not just put any single letter we possibly can just because our compliance officer might let us put whatever we want on our business cards. It's not doing the job. Okay, we get providing evidence to establish ability trust. Let's talk about the harder one. What do we do to establish integrity trust with the market? What do you in fact do?
Well, it's nice that you can have an office they actually go to. You're not working just out of your car.
Really? Okay, so is that integrity? Is that the I will do it part?
Well,
For me, I will do it. Not I can do it, I will do it. Okay, I don't know. Well, that's good. I mean, I'm not saying there's rights and wrongs to a lot of this stuff. I personally wouldn't put that on a list, but that doesn't mean you're wrong.
no, but
Ask
I
my
think
wife.
that-
I'm wrong all the time, so this could be one of those
No,
examples.
but I do think that when you hold yourself out as a professional, that it's
There's certain things associated
right, sure.
with
and
that.
so it's a bigger picture than just having an office and
Yeah.
not working out of your car. But it's the whole thing. I mean, you know, if you go to your doctor and he's got dirty instruments, you're not saying.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's. I think a better point was the second example. Here's what I suggest is that when we communicate to our audience, so we're going to get into this big time in a couple of minutes, so I'm not getting digressed in here, is that what you might do to communicate and establish integrity trust to your audience might be different than what I might do, in part because the audiences are different. So what I'm hearing you say is that a way of approaching this is about some of this stuff, and that many of the clients that you might want to engage that suits them. I work from home. After 30 years, nobody really gives a shit where I work, and I still get the gig. It doesn't matter. And in fact, on the money management side, you know, and this is to the TD Wealths of the world. So the portfolio manager I work for, 600 million in assets, we did 21.5% last year, 17 average, or 5-year average of 17.5%. Really good funds. There's a reason that I sit on the investment committee, 25 years, etc. But the overhead is like down to nothing. And part of the types of clients we engage, someone say, can I come by your office? I work from home in Western Canada. What would you rather have, a cappuccino or 21.5%? Because you can't have both, because the money comes out of their pocket. And consumers know this. And this is now that balance that some of these financial services companies are going to have to go to. Someone's going to say, wait a second, when they get that CRM2 statement, and it says you were charged this, that, and the other thing, and your balance went from 100 grand to 99,000, and they're going to go, where did all that money go? Wait a second, they got that tower, and they got this, and they got that. It's coming out of my pocket, which is the only place it could come out of.
I'm laughing because we have what we call speaker series. And so we have a speaker coming, and one of the immediate responses is asking one of my clients. I have nothing to do with that. Yeah, is this where TD is spending my money?
Right. Interesting. And what was your answer to that?
I sent it to the president to reply to.
Yeah.
Because I have no idea what went behind picking this, so I would hope that they could back up the choice of speakers.
Well, and you know, there's probably reasonable answers such as, we feel that this particular speaker will help you make more money or save more money or whatever your value prop is to the market. Or it's a free speaker. He's being sponsored by that sponsor. He's
Well, yeah,
teaching.
I have no idea.
Or it's on ethics. Don't you want me to get better at that? Come up with these quips. Evidence in support of integrity trust. What do? There are kind of trust with the market. It's something that's happening organically. It's because they come to trust you, or because there's a baseline social trust out there, which we're going to explore now. But there's not a formal process. We don't go certified ethical person on our card afterwards, because there's not a process around that. So we have to be more clever and creative. And one of the cool things that's going on because of this crisis of trust is professionals increasingly are looking for help in articulating that trustworthiness to the market. So one of the things I do as a consultant is help these organizations do that. And I remember I said, this was almost without a commercial. So that was an example of a commercial. This is actually how I get paid to go off and help them do these kinds of things. But it's not straightforward, so they build different things, as we're going to talk about in a second. But there's not a process, so they kind of got to make it up as they go along. Now, some of the things we do to establish integrity trust is we start making promises to our clients and fulfilling the promises. You show up on time. You said, hey, I'll get that report to you by this date. Whole expression, overpromise, underpromise, overperform, in part so you can start establishing the kind of trust. Years ago, one of the things I would do when I was talking to clients or anybody in my space is I would say, hey, Sharon, as promised, I'm calling you back to confirm our appointment. I always do as promised because I wanted the market to see that I could make and keep a promise. I intuitively knew that that was a step in establishing trust, and I would fulfill the promise, but it was almost like they needed a reminder. So we do things kind of to help do that. Let's talk about social contract. I think this is cool. Social contract is a concept that suggests that for human beings to function together, to come together in a tribe originally, or society today, there must be kind of a baseline trust. So, for example, who drove here today? Almost everybody. Anybody come by the airport, by the way? On the way, do you have to go by the airport on the way home? You want to drive me, anything close to the airport, any hotel you could see, you could just kick me out at? No, not that one, Toronto. It cost me $160 to get out here today.
Oh, you can drive me.
Okay, that's great. See, that worked out really well. Thank you for that.
I'm good.
That's great. I didn't mean to do that. I just realized I need a ride home.
I live right by the airport.
In Toronto?
Yeah.
Oh, would you mind? You guys can arm wrestle over me if you want afterwards.
I literally like 3 minutes.
That's beautiful. Great. And I love company. So you drove, we all drove. When you were driving, what highway did you come up? 405? What is it?
No, Burylo.
Yeah.
405? Is that a number? 401. Sharon, when you drove up to 401, did you legitimately think, were you legitimately worried that someone would try to drive their car into you?
Yes. There's a lot of trucks always. It was pretty congested.
But you drove, so you couldn't have been that worried.
No, that's true.
Okay, so what's going on here? This is an experience we've all had. What's going on here? Why is it that she felt comfortable? Implied. Or, another expression, we might say it's a version of the social contract. We've decided for this thing to function, we're going to call society here in Toronto, that we more or less are going to, we have the abilities and we're going to follow the rules, we're going to drive down. So we have this implied trust. So what's behind that? Now this is where we get deep in philosophy. What is going on that I'm prepared to drive down the highway with Sharon and think that I don't really have to worry that she's going to try to drive her car into me? What's going on?
Because we all follow rules of the road.
Follow rules.
Other people are going to respect the rules of the road.
Yeah, and I want to say it's more than rules.
Yeah.
Remember?
Sharon's got some skin in the game too, If she goes off the airport, she wants to stay on the road too, so she's got some skin in the game.
Skin. We got skin, we got rules. What have you got?
Well, that's what I said, rules and laws.
Rules and laws. See, and I want to suggest to you that it's important to think that there's something else going on. Values.
Yeah.
Remember I said, if it's just about the rules, we're missing something. Here's what's going on. It's reasonable for me to think that Sharon and I have the same values. For example, I don't mean values. I mean, she values her physical health.
Yeah.
I value my physical health. She values her car. I value my car. She's got kids in the back of the car. I've got a dog. We value our cargo. It's reasonable to think that we're sharing the same values such that it'll motivate us to follow the rules. But the rules are there not because everybody needs a rule. right? They're rules of the game. It's because the values are the same. See, this is what's missing in so many ethics conversations. It becomes, what are the rules? We're going to follow the rule. No, that's not why you're doing it. Even if you were following the rule blindly, you still have a value behind that says, I follow rules blindly. Now, again, if you were in Nazi Germany, you might not think that was a great idea, right? This is why it's important to understand the values behind it. Now, a couple years ago, a bunch of people got on a plane in Spain, and the pilot flew. Nope, that's good. This supposed to be my serious note. We're not rapping here. Are you going to rap in the car when we're together? No. What really happened? Flew into the mountains. When we get on a plane, I flew out here, it's reasonable for me to think that the pilot values their life, or at least values the lives of everybody else, and if you're going to kill yourself, you're going to do that on your own someplace that doesn't impact everybody else. Why are you laughing at this? This is a somber
I
story.
was just going to say, I don't usually try to book flying or anything, but on the flight to BC, we got, we're supposed to fly like the one night, and got changed to it was canceled to the next day, and 3 times it got changed the next morning, and it apparently was to do with mechanical failure. And we get on the plane, and I'm like, I don't know if this is the same plane or not that's had all these issues. But we get on the plane, and basically it starts going, and all of a sudden it just slows down. And then they say, well, we got to check something. And I looked at my husband, and I said, I'm assuming that the pilot doesn't want to die. So I'm thinking, like you said,
It's a reasonable assumption. And that's a good example, because that's what's going on, generally speaking. So let's keep going with this thought. Generally speaking, historically, you could say, well, somebody's going to trust me. They might have trust of me unless I prove them wrong, unless I screw it up, right? But that's not what's going on anymore. Increasingly, one of the reasons why we have this crisis of trust is increasingly consumers, institutions are choosing to distrust us. There is not a baseline trust. There's no social contract. And in fact, one of the reasons is lessening social contract is because in the past, if people had to deal with people, then you have to choose to deal with people. But now they don't. They can deal with technology, and technology is changing everything in the industry, which we're going to talk about in a
I
couple
always say to people, like, not that I'm trying to stand up for other people, other advisors and that, but I would say sometimes it's not always distrust or lack of trust. It's managing the expectations and knowing, like, from both ends, like client knowing what they should expect. And if they expect something beyond what that advisor can deliver, then they shouldn't be disappointed if that advisor can't deliver that service or whatever it is.
Yeah, and that's fair. So meeting expectations with results. You said what I put up here, distrust and lack of trust, so I want to speak to that to make sure that you're clear on the distinction I'm making. There's not trust and not trust. There's trust, a lack of trust, and distrust. So think of the analogy as being talking about the belief in a God. A person could say, I believe there is a God. A person could say, I don't think there's enough evidence to conclude that there is a God, or completely know that there's no God. We call that agnosticism. And then we have another belief system that could be, I believe there is no God. And those are 3 separate things. It's not black and white. It's the same thing with trust that's going on in society right now. Someone could trust us as a person or as an industry. There can be a lack of trust, which is suggesting, if you give me evidence, if you sit down and talk about expectations and how you're paid, and, I could come to trust you. And then there is, no, I've already decided I don't trust you. That's the, I don't believe there's a God. I believe there is no God. It's the same thing as, you're not worthy of my trust. This is what the millennials are saying. There's got to be an app for this too. Right? There's got to be an app for this. Again, kudos to you for having a specialty that's hard to replicate. There's a lot of advisors out there that are going to be replaced by technology, and they will wish they had done classes like this.
Right.
Yes.
One of the things that we are challenged with are though that the legal community doesn't fully trust us.
That's a really interesting question. So the legal community doesn't trust us. What I would do, if you want, is to spend some time with someone like me to say, how do we change that? What is it? And we're going to start talking about communication strategy here in just a second, because I want to go from theory, well, that's all well and good, I'm glad I did my ethics class, to what the hell do I do about this when I go to work the next day? And in your mind, you're going, what do I do about this? So the classic response is we build a communication strategy. where the response is supposed to be trust. And we could start working on that if you want to. I don't know what that looks like, but it's a really good topic.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really good topic. Okay, here's an example of something that people are doing to give evidence of integrity trust. So in the United States, they have a thing called an ethics audit. I introduced this to Canada last year. I get paid to do audits of financial advisors and practices. And what we do is, it's my assessment of them from an ethics perspective. So I'll talk about, do they have a code of ethics? Do they subscribe to this, that, and the other thing? Are there complaints with the regulators, the compliance officers? What are they doing culturally, internally? And believe it or not, advisors are paying me to do this. It costs about $1,000, just so you know. I'm not here to pitch it. I'm here to give you an example of what people out there are currently doing. So when the advisors are sitting down with a lawyer that they want to get referrals from, they're not only providing evidence of their ability, and maybe one of the key things is also providing evidence of the integrity of the organization as a communications piece. So maybe talking about what the ethics is, or talking about what the average history and those kinds of things, or the service they provide, or transparencies, or whatever those things are. This is an example of what some, I would say, more successful advisors in Canada are currently doing to help establish integrity trust. If anyone wants to see a copy of a sample, just you have my email, say, hey Rod, thanks for the speech, send me a copy, I just want to see what it looks like for shits and giggles, and I'm happy to do that for you. Hope you don't mind me dropping some X-bombs like that every once in a while. Okay, ethics audit. To be a piece, a tool, part of a strategy to help communicate or establish integrity trust with the market. So let's shift gears a little bit now. As I indicated, I'd like to go a bit from fairly abstract ideas to something that's a little bit more practical business building. But to do that, I'm going to need to get some more water. Oh, do you mind, Linda? Thanks. Okay, good. So we're going to now take a body of education or skill set that I call communication strategy, and we're going to look for opportunities to embed in that these topics related to ethics and trust and so on. And this is how we're going to take some of that stuff and make it applied. And I think you're getting a sense of where I'm going this already from some of the comments. I teach a class on this as well. Communication strategy. I want to suggest to you that all of our activity as advisors, professionals, as people who run associations, thank you so much, as parents, as the places you volunteer, as other professionals, all human activity is going to fall into two categories of activity. The stuff we do to give value, and communicating about the stuff we do to give value. That's it. That's what I'm going to suggest to you. We get various degrees of good at giving value to the market. We go to university, we go and take designations, we do continuing education, we study changes in tax laws or divorce civil laws and what have you, and we try to stay on top of the value that we give. The challenge we run into is there are really good people that are really good at stuff that couldn't communicate that to the market very well. When in the various times I've been in management roles, I've often remarked that some of the smartest people that I worked with were the worst business people, couldn't attract an audience if their life depended on it, liked to sit at the computer and convince themselves that that was giving value to the market, and then wonder why they weren't making any money. Really smart people. When you go to law school, when you go to maybe a little bit different CA, law school, you're a doctor, you're a dentist, most of that stuff is about what you do to give value. It's not about communicating that, turning that into a business opportunity. It's a very completely different skill set. Giving value to a consumer in the form of helping them with a marriage breakdown is a different competency from communicating to other professionals that you're good about that thing. And that's, I think, one of the things you're saying is how do we get them to accept us? Simply being good at it will not be enough. It's the skill set about communicating that we're good at it that's the critical part. So I think that's really important. The value we give to the market. One of the other problems we have in that area, because to articulate that value, we've got to understand it. Very often advisors of various professions, especially the financial services profession, when they think about the value you get to market, they focus on the value as the means value only. What I mean by that is they're focused on the specific thing that they do, that product that they sell, the plan that they hand to a client, as if that's the value. That's not the value. The value is what that does for the person. Okay? It's really important. And I know it's almost cliche, but it's critical at this point, because if you're going to communicate value to the market, it's got to be not just the means value, it's got to be the ends value. So the example, when I had that Canadians Retiring Abroad business, which was a ton of fun, that's the cruise ships and stuff like that, I would say to advisors, I used to teach a class for advocates on that, I say to the advisors, write down all the things you do for clients, and then show me which ones are on the client's bucket list. 1. Do they want to get a seg fund? No. It's not on their bucket list. Was their bucket list an amicable divorce? I'm not even sure what the example, you guys can come up with a better example. But it's not on their bucket list. It's not what they ultimately want. It's not the ultimate value. But we do sometimes get a little focused on that part. What we want to get focused on is on the ends part. When we were doing Canadians Retiring Abroad, it was about asset management and non-residential tax returns and how do you manage risk issues if you're traveling and where do you go and what does it cost to be there and all that kind of stuff. But there was a lot of kind of practical stuff. The clients, that was not on their bucket list. Retiring in Mexico was on their bucket list. Learning to speak Spanish, having their kids visit them in Costa Rica, their grandkids, that was bucket list items. If you did a survey of your clients and say, let's do this internally right now. Top 10 things you want to do before you die, in your head. How many of them are travel related? And that's classic, right? And so, interesting. So we built an entire industry where consumers will list off all the places in the world that they want to go to before they die, and we talk about seg funds and stuff. What we should be talking about is how these things help them get the things that they really want. And that's where I talk when I'm discussing here this distinction between what we do to give value and communicating about what we do to give value. I'm inviting you to start to make a distinction in your head between the means value and the ends value. Because if you can't, you won't be able to articulate that to the market. The ends value for a lawyer might not be what's specifically happening with that couple. The ends value for a lawyer might be something else, more revenue, an opportunity to do other things. I'm not clear, but that's one of the ways that we could get tripped up, is we do this to help you get to this. Oh, good. Plug in or find another power source.
Can you just check because I'm plugged? No, I'm just wondering if this is unplugged. There's something.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks again. Okay. All of our activity into 2 categories. About what we do to give value, now communicating about what we do to give value. The cool thing about this approach is communication part is totally process orientated. It's great. Every time I get involved with an organization, a large company like the fund manager I'm dealing with, I'll give you an example. You might think this is weird. In January, I was sent to Hawaii, and I did a communication strategy for leaders for all the Buddhist temples on Oahu. I hope you think that's cool. And they Skyped in all the ones from the other islands. So I had about 45 people, mostly Japanese heritage in there. And basically, they needed someone to help them build a communication strategy. And I mostly do that for accounting firms and lawyer firms and financial services stuff. But the process is totally replicable for any environment, which is the cool thing, and over again. So what does that process look like? What is communication strategy? There's always 5 steps in a communication strategy. Someone came to me and they said, I want to be a better business person. And they said, should I take another course? Should I get better at this? Should I get better at that? I said, you got to get better at communicating about what you're good at already. So here are the 5 steps that everybody needs to go through. 1 and 2 are interchangeable. I put them in this order for the purposes today. But one of the first things you do, it's either 1 or 2, is clearly determine what your response is. What is my response? Clearly determine that. If I'm going to communicate, to what end? The example we're going to use today for this class is communicating to get referrals. You may be saying, how do I communicate to establish trust? But you need to know the response. And you need to clearly identify the audiences to whom you're communicating. Clearly. A clients, B clients, lawyers, accountants, regulators, stakeholders in my business, my family and friends. the local media, if you're engaging the local media, whatever it is. When we do an actual formula strategy for an organization, when I get paid to do that, I will have them list out and describe every single sub-audience. Now, we don't want to go crazy. If there's too many audiences, this will be unmanageable. If there's too few, then they're not communicating too clearly enough. So usually what they'll do is we'll come up with, say, 10 or 15 target audiences, and then we'll prioritize. So for example, if I want to get referrals, maybe a priority audience should be lawyers, or clients that I've already had. Happy past clients might be an example. We describe those people. We get clear on who we're communicating to. What is the response from them? Step 3, craft the message. The words, the images, the sounds that's designed to get that response or responses from those audiences we're communicating to. When we formalize a strategy, we'll really write out what the message is, or we'll describe features of it, an image. You know, a Canadian flag is communicating something to this organization. It was a choice that was made, and it's not a word, but it's communicating something, right? So whatever, this is an example, perhaps, of a media, which is delivering a message to the audience, and hopefully for a response. So if Linda said to me, hey, I want to do something to communicate to this group here, and she said, you know, maybe she said, I'm thinking about doing a banner or something like that, or I said, well, what do you want them to do or to think or feel? What do you want them to do, think, or feel? How do you want them to respond? You know, we might come up with a message, and then we say, okay, how do we deliver that message? What's that media? Now, so media, I don't mean TV or radio. I mean any communication delivery system. That could be things you're already doing, like newsletters, sign-offs on emails, business cards. I was teaching this class in Ottawa 3 or 4 months ago, a variation of this class, and one of the reps in there said, you know, I thank you in advance for referrals or something on his business cards. I'm not saying that you should do that. It's an example of a delivery system of a message to an audience designed to get a specific response. Is it effective? I don't know. But it's an example of a communication strategy. What we do then is we pick the audience, the response we want, we craft the message. This is what you would do as in the association. You'd follow this format. So I want lawyers to trust us enough to refer business to us. Identify subcategories of lawyers or the people that run, our partners that run that area in a larger firm, or standalone people, or whatever it is, maybe financial advisors, whoever has first line of sight on some of these things. We draft the message, and then we figure out how do we deliver that to them. Delivery system's important. Getting in front of lawyers might be, hey, do we do a lunch and get them all in the same room? I'll do a quick anecdote. I think I was going to do it later, but I'll do it now. One of the, and this is also in the book, one of the top advisors that I'd worked with for years flew me out to Kamloops to talk to lawyers and accountants. He got them all in the room for lunch. He stood up in front of the audience. He said, basically, you know, here's the services I provide. I give you guys lots of referrals as professions. How come you don't give me referrals back? Classic problem in financial services space. We get referrals all the time. It's so hard to get them back, right? Everyone's nodding because we know it. So one of the people stood up in the room. This really happened. I think it was a lawyer. And he said, you know, basically, I don't know. I think I can speak on behalf of everybody. I don't know. But this is probably what's going on. He says, it's not that we don't trust you or we don't think that what you do has merit. It's just that we're uncomfortable with the liability, the problem if we refer someone to you and things go wrong. Classic example. But then this is what the lawyer said, which is brilliant, and everything changed for the advisor. The lawyer said, however, if we were in the right social circumstances, I would introduce all my clients to you. So one of the ways that the Awesome Client events came together as a concept for them is we'd host client events, give tickets to the lawyers, and the lawyers would bring their clients. He'd just walk around and meet everybody, completely in the comfort of the lawyers, but slightly different from what they had in mind. So the response was not send me your client and a phone number. The response was bring a client out to my event. You know, a very different way. So delivering that message. So when we do a communication strategy, we follow these steps and then we put into place and we monitor or assess for results. The monitor or assessing is really important. It's important in that we should understand kind of what our current circumstances are, so that if we're measuring results, we're measuring them against current. And I'll give you an example when we change the page here. Is that clear? That is applicable to everybody. You got a kid that wants to wash windows or cut grass. It's the exact same strategy. It's always the same strategy. It's just what gets plugged in is slightly different. So let's apply this now to a particular response or objective. Remember I said there's 5 things. The first thing could be response. We want to get referrals. Let's say that's your goal. I do workshops on this that go as long as 3 hours. And the workshops that I do, somebody actually will work through this in the workshop and come out the other side with their entire communication strategy. And you and I would, if we did something like that, we would have a session where we sat down and said, let's spend 3 hours and just map out everything and implement and then tweak, right? It takes usually about 3 hours. But in this particular example today, I'm going to tell us what our goal is, because we've got to start with something. It's going to be getting referrals. That's our goal. So how do we get prepared to do that? First of all, we got to make it clear to the market what a referral means. Is it a name and a phone number? Is it having them come out to an event? Is it having someone bring someone to the office and say, I'm introducing you to my friend? We can't measure the success of a referral system if we don't know what will count as a referral when we get it, right? So what does a referral mean? Are we ready? What is our process in place to engage this person? When I was doing the Canadians Retiring Abroad business and we were doing client events, we had our brands were often branded as Retire to Mexico, ! Or Adventures in Retirement, ! We run a little ad in the newspaper, and how many people do you think would come out for these things?
Not many.
Hundreds and hundreds. 500 in Saskatoon, 500 in Winnipeg, 275 or so in
What kind of
Edmonton.
newspaper you did?
This is 10 years ago. But the point, yeah, no, I agree. But you're missing the point. It's not the delivery system, it's the message. Advisors are saying, let me help you with retirement. Learn more about this strategy or this product that I want to sell. And we're like, no, let's get right to the bucket list.
They want to learn this.
We had 500 people come out. Sounds like we're smart, right? Got the Advisor of the Year Award, covers of magazines, CBC Radio. We totally blew it. You want to know why we blew it? We get 500 people in the room, and we were absolutely freaking clueless what to do with them. We got 3 senior advisors collaborating, which means we fought over who had to do what, and so people didn't get back to. We get 500 people. By the time we called them back, they were so choked that it was terrible. We had a great idea. We sucked at execution. But, you learn stuff, right? That's why I'm here. I'm not here because I'm really good at everything. I'm here because I've had some experiences. We weren't ready. So one of the things, now you're going to go, Rod, I'm not going to get 500 referrals come in. But this portfolio manager that I'm working with, what I'm doing for them is turning on entire dealerships of referrals. So we'll get 100 advisors in a month, start referring business, then I'll find another 100 advisors. I have to know that if I'm getting 100 referrals coming in next month, that the systems are in place can handle that. Now you might be saying, geez, Rod, I'd be happy if I got 1 referral a month and I can easily handle that. And that's cool. Then your answer is not a problem. But imagine that you could get involved, that it really clicks, that you really hit a home run, and now you're hiring people like yourself, your whole team, and you're going, what the hell does this look like? What is the system for engaging that person? So Sharon gets a referral from me. I've got to know. So let's say Sharon says to me, she's really smart afterwards. She goes, I'm going to get Rod to give me referrals. He's got all those Italians out here. I'm going to beat him to the punch before Fiore gets in there, right? Hey, Rod, if you got any of those Italians, say, we don't do divorce. We do, I'll kill you instead. So if you're in the funeral business, call me. I don't know, is that offside? No, okay, they don't get it. Anyway, but the point is, so you're saying, I want to get referrals from Rod, whatever that might look like. But what you're going to need to do is say to me, so what's the system? Well, if you come across someone, here's what you're looking for. A person said, I'm getting divorced, and it could be more complicated, but let's just say it's that. I say, okay, it's a person getting divorced, and you say, yeah, just say, listen, I can only help one, or I tend to prefer to help the women. I don't know what your deal is, but you got to tell me, otherwise I won't know what to do. And you say, when you talk to her, say, are you dealing with anybody yet like this? Because maybe what you say, well, the process is I want to talk to the lawyer first if there's a lawyer. I don't know. How would I know this stuff? So then I'm going, okay, I'll find out who the lawyer is, I'll find the number is, and what do I give it to you? And you say, oh, no, I'm too busy because we only take 1 in 10. You got to give it to Fiore down there, and she's going to cull it for me, and then we're going to decide. But the point is, if I don't know the process, then I won't know how to do that. And so one of the reasons that people don't give referrals is they really don't know what that process is because we didn't tell them. So when we get started for referrals, we've got to make sure we understand what that looks like. Are we ready? What is the process? I got referred to a consulting client this morning, and on the way here, I was texting the referring party saying, thank you very much for the referral. It's not complicated. I'm not saying it's rocket science, but I thought about it. Part of my process is someone gives me a referral, I'm going to thank them right away. I'm going to give them that positive reinforcement. When I was at Investors Group, I had a pretty big practice before I went into management, and I was cheap and poor, because a lot of us are when we start out this business. I had 2 little kids at home, and a wife who was staying at home. Credits, associations. I mean, when I called Linda, Linda was a classic example of me identifying a prospect and pursuing it with a pitch. Hey Linda, I noticed you have ethics classes that are required. I get that that's really important. I can give you something. Do you have conferences? Oh, you have a conferences? Great. How can I help you with that? It's a simple pitch, and I know I can bring value. So she'd go, okay, I get it. But you can do the same thing with a bunch of lawyers. We've got to find out what their CE requirements are. How do they engage like that? I'm currently involved with law firms that I'm giving value to in Calgary, not on this topic, on other things, and they all need it. The beauty thing of this, why I'm not hesitant to call Linda, is why you should not be hesitant to call associations, even if you're see that as being a salesman thing kind of do. The reason why I knew it is because I knew I was helping Linda with the call. I was doing a favor for her. She needs an ethics teacher. I want to be that person. She won't be offended that I'm calling. Now she might have picked someone, or she might think I'm not qualified. That's all fine. But I never was afraid that she wouldn't go, oh, okay, cool, I get you're interested in our group, I get that. So the legal profession or the law firms, they have their own lawyer engagement processes, their own CE credit requirements, their own professional development stuff, and we can tap into a whole variety of different things on this topic. Somebody can represent the organization at large, or each of you can do that yourself. One of the ways I would source those people out is the way I sourced Linda out, is I was dealing with some advisors in Canada. They told me what associations they liked, and I said, oh, that sounds like a good one. I'm going to find out who runs that. You could go to lawyers. This is what I would do if I was one of you. Go to one of the lawyers that's already likes you and giving you business and say, hey, I had this bozo doing a class on referral generation. He was kind of weird, but made me think, if you were me, how would you get more lawyers to refer business to you? If you were me and you wanted to teach a class for lawyers, who would you call? What would you do? And you ask for their advice. You don't have to figure it out. And they'll say, shitty idea. Or they'll say, no, actually, if I were you, I'd call the bar. Or I'd call this particular partner in our firm looks after all the professional development stuff. Just call them. Once a month they do a lunch and learn, and if you come out and talk about your services, they'll really like it. You're doing them a favor. You never know. Okay, I'm getting close to the end now, I swear, Linda.
Okay.
Good? Everybody wants to go? Last 2 slides. I'll summarize with some key points, some takeaways. We have to establish a trust. We have to establish trust. It's the number one thing. We don't do that, we've got a problem. We've got to be seen as doing the right things, not merely doing them, not merely being ethical, but letting the market and our audience know that we are in fact ethical. Otherwise, what's the point? Part of that is articulating the why in what we do and not just the what. That's, again, that ends value. It's the values behind what we do. Why is it important? Why is it important that we help people through divorce? Maybe because people in this room went through one themselves and wish that they had had help at that point. I don't know. Or they saw a friend or family member go through something that they wished that they had had help, decided that that was their opportunity. Articulating the why you're excited about what you do is really, really important. It speaks about your values. The values are what's behind creating trust, remember. And if we don't do that, we're selling commodities. We won't be able to differentiate. Not you guys in particular, but other advisors out there are going to be replaced by technology because they won't know how to do this. They will forget. But one of the risks about using social media as a way, and they convince themselves that they're relationship building somehow, is that's not how real relationships are built. That's somebody else in control of the communication. Back in the 80s, a lady named Faith Popcorn wrote a book. You guys remember it, the Popcorn Report? Remember one of the things she predicted for this time? I'm not saying it's true. She said that there'll be a need for shyness consultants. Because she said that because of technology, people will start to forget, or their skill set on interpersonal communication and engagement is going to start to drop off. And we might see some of that showing up in our kids. But it's a good lesson for us because it is our opportunity. Technology can only do so much. If we bring the humanness back to what we're doing and we know how to engage other people on referrals or what have you, we can compete against technology. And I think you guys are well positioned to do that. There's a lot of financial advisors out there who are not well positioned to do that at all. Last slide. Doing the right thing, ethics, does reduce risk. But if you know how to communicate about that, you can make a lot more money, and that's really the message, is the best business is going to be a combination of both. That's my very long presentation for you today. Thanks for your patience.